I'm the youngest of three sisters. So we have Kristen, who is now 33, I think, and she's a mom and she's married. And then we have Brooke, who is 24 and she's engaged. And then we have me, who is a senior at Assumption College. And then when I was 2, we brought home a little Barry. So first of all, I had a little resentment to this new baby because I had been the center of attention. I was the youngest, the cutest. My sisters made over me. Everyone made over me. I loved attention. And so then once this new little baby came home, I wasn't sure how I felt about him because he was naturally trying to take my center of attention. When Barry first came home, we thought we had a normal baby brother and we loved him and treated him just like every other baby brother. My best friend growing up actually had a brother the same age. So we were going through this struggle together, unknowingly, of course, only at 2 years old. And so then pretty quickly, we realized Barry wasn't quite normal, and I still didn't really understand what any of that meant. I knew he got a cold that the rest of us had. Brooke had brought it home from preschool, and I could see that we felt better in a couple weeks and Barry didn't. And I still didn't know what that meant, but after going to a lot of doctors and him still getting worse, finally we realized that there was something really wrong. And so me only being 2 at the time, not going to school, not going to daycare, I was dragged along to all these appointments. So I used to hear big words like globally disabled and macrocephaly and visually impaired. And I didn't know what any of this meant, but I did know that I was always used as the healthy control because whenever anything new came up with Barry, they wanted to see, since I was at all the appointments, see if I had it too. So I can remember from a little age them measuring Barry's head and then measuring my head and realizing that we both had huge heads. So maybe that was a little bit more genetic than some sort of connection to his troubles. His first year of life was pretty tricky just because we didn't really know what the future held, and anytime our little germy hands got near him, it ran the risk of him getting pretty sick. So I think that I still thought he was normal because if I look back at pictures, I see me holding his head up because he couldn't do it himself, and then you see me with other babies and I was holding their heads up too because I just figured they couldn't do it either. I'm trying to think of the first time I actually realized that something was wrong. I think it was when Brooke was in the 3rd grade. So I must have been like 5, Barry must have been like 3. Brooke had some activity at school and all the siblings and parents were invited. So we all went, and even seeing other healthy siblings, I still didn't really realize anything was wrong until one other student made a comment about how Barry was different. And that kind of just sparked it for me that something wasn't right. Like, not every little kid, I realized myself, like I wasn't going to the doctor every week and I didn't suffer from colds for weeks on end. So that kind of made me realize that he was pretty different. So I think then I started asking a lot of questions. I started asking questions to my mom, and then when we would go to the doctors, I would ask more questions. And as I got older, the questions got a little bit more sophisticated, and I got really involved in Barry's care. And I love science, so I always have, and hopefully always will. Anytime I would learn about a new aspect of Barry's care as I would start to get older, I would research it and research some new treatments, and then go to the doctors and ask, well, why aren't we doing this? What does this mean for Barry, like in relation to all these other problems and that kind of thing. So I was really involved in his care, but also Barry was my best friend. I didn't know many siblings, boy-girl siblings who were 2 years apart, who could lay on the couch and just sing all day together without wanting to kill each other. So that was different, but in the best possible way. We were close in a way that no other boy-girl sibling I know of were close. I told Barry everything, and he had to be sworn to secrecy because he couldn't talk, so that came in handy, I would say. And, I always was amazed that he was facing all these problems, but he could always make me feel better. My senior year in high school, I went through kind of a rough time with a relationship, and I couldn't really talk about it. I was really upset all the time, didn't want my mom to hear, but when we would go to Seven Hills, I would just kind of think about it in my head. And when I would lay with him, it just felt like he was telling me, like, he understood. Like, he just would put his hands somewhere on me and just kind of somehow calm me down in a way that I really can't explain. And a lot of people would say to me, like, well, how are you close if you can't talk? Like, what do you do together? And I said, I don't know. You just have to see it. Like, anyone who saw us together knew that we shared this bond that I don't even know if my other sisters had with him. It was just something like that we could just be in each other's presence and just feel that it was going to be okay. And I think that that might be why I was always hopeful, even when my scientific mind kind of knew otherwise, and my family and the doctors worried that it was too much optimism. I just felt like I kind of knew when Barry was going to be okay and when he wasn't. I think it was like a two-way street, though. Barry could calm me down, but I could also calm him down. Like, when I would get to the hospital and he was in a crisis and had tubes coming out of every area in his body, I would somehow crawl through all the wires and get as close as I could to him. And like, all it really took was for me to put on some soft rock, as I like to call it, and sing quietly and just rub his tummy as he loved. And just when I thought he would be asleep and I would stop rubbing his tummy, his hand would always be on top of mine whenever I was doing it. And as soon as I would stop, he would push my hand to tell me to keep going. And they used to call that the sister test. I didn't know how bad it was, because when I first saw Barry, I thought to myself, I'd seen him worse before, honestly, because right now it just seemed like he was sleeping a lot. So I kind of figured it was like a drug imbalance sort of thing. My mom kind of didn't tell me all the details, so I didn't really realize how bad the situation was at first. I think when I realized it, it was about a week before he passed away. And I think it was mine and Brooke's last visit together. And his nurse from his old school was there. And I realized that he hadn't been getting any feeds. And so I said to her, how long can he go without eating? And she told me, not very much longer. So I knew then that it wasn't good. And they said that they weren't going to restart the feed. So I really knew that our time together was limited. You knew it was bad when off-duty nurses were coming in to see Barry, that they were coming to say goodbye. And I remember thinking, like, how can we just end this for him? Like, I had never really seen him in pain like this before, that wasn't caused by something understandable. Like, when he had his spinal fusion, of course, he was groaning a lot. He was in pain. He just had 2 huge rods nailed into his spine, so that was a little understandable. But in this instance, he hadn't had a surgery. He hadn't been seizing, and he was grimacing and moaning every time he took a breath. And I was trying to figure out some way to either save him or the opposite, take away the pain somehow. And I had always taken the standpoint that I wanted Barry to be here as long as possible. My mom always said comfort over, or quality over quantity, but I really wanted the best of both worlds, and I think sometimes I lean toward quantity. I really wanted him to be here to see me get my white coat. I wanted him to be at my white coat ceremony so bad. And in these last couple of days, I realized that I couldn't ask him to do anything else for me. He had really shaped me into who I was as a person. He taught me so much more than any 19-year-old knew about pain and suffering, empathy, pretty much anything, you name it. And he had given me so much insight to what I wanted to do with my life, and so much happiness. And I realized at that moment I could not ask him to do another thing for me. So I asked Dr. Hauer, I said, how do we speed this up? How do we take away his pain? And at this time, the only kind of support he had was oxygen. And she said, we can shut the oxygen off. And this part I really don't talk about, because I feel sometimes like, well, what would have happened if I hadn't asked to shut that off? But I also know that I helped him in that moment. But I think that it's a very fine balance, and it's really hard to think about. And as a 19-year-old, I think that was a really hard thing for me to even ask. While he's left a legacy for me, I think that if I could make his legacy even bigger in finding out answers for other people and getting his story out there, then I think that maybe I would repay him just a little bit for all the things he did for me and gave me. So that is my life's mission, to fulfill that promise and figure out what happened to him and help the other kids like him.